I wasn't born with a distrust of homeowners associations. That's something I earned through 20 years of military service and another 15 running my own construction business. When you've navigated Taliban-controlled mountain passes and negotiated with hardened union reps, you develop a sixth sense for power-hungry people with too much time on their hands. But even I wasn't prepared for Kathleen Evanston. The first time I saw her marching up my half-mile-long gravel driveway, clipboard in hand and that signature burnt orange bob bouncing with each determined step, I knew I was in for a fight. Not that I was worried. This was my land, 5 beautiful acres of rolling Kentucky hills that I'd purchased with my retirement savings and built my dream home on, far from the manufactured pleasantries of suburban living. "Mr. Garrison," she called out as I set down my coffee on the porch railing. "Xavier Garrison, I presume?" "That's me," I replied, not bothering to hide my annoyance at the unexpected Saturday morning visitor. "And you are?" "Kathleen Evanston, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She spoke the title with the gravity of someone announcing they were the Secretary General of the United Nations. "I'm here to discuss an urgent matter regarding access to your private road." I almost laughed. "Ms. Evanston, I'm not part of any homeowners association. My property isn't connected to Meadowbrook in any way except that we share a county." She smiled thinly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "That's precisely what I'm here to discuss. The board has voted, and we're incorporating your access road into our community infrastructure plan." That's when I knew this wasn't just a casual visit. This was an invasion. "My property line starts at the county road and extends all the way up here," I explained slowly, as if talking to a child. "The driveway you just walked up. That's my private road, built with my own money, on my own land." Kathleen's smile didn't waver. "Be that as it may, Mr. Garrison, Meadowbrook needs secondary access for emergency vehicles. Your road is ideally situated. The board has already voted, and you'll be receiving official documentation next week." I'd faced down enough bureaucratic nonsense in my time to recognize the strategy, act like the decision was already made, hope I'd roll over without a fight. Not happening. "Ms. Evanston, unless you're planning to purchase my land at about 3 times market value, there's nothing to discuss. Now, I've got work to do." I expected her to argue, but instead, she just nodded pleasantly, as if we'd had a productive chat about the weather. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Garrison. I suggest you consult with your attorney." As she turned and marched back down my driveway, I had the distinct feeling that this was only the beginning of my troubles. I wasn't wrong. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from Meadowbrook Estates Community Development Corporation, informing me that my private access road had been designated as a community emergency access route, and that I was required to provide unfettered access within 30 days. The letter mentioned county ordinances, public safety protocols, and even threw in some vague references to eminent domain. It was impressive, really, a masterclass in official-sounding nonsense. My first call was to my buddy Marcus, who'd served with me in Afghanistan and now worked as a county deputy. "Xavier. How's retirement treating you, old man?" His booming voice was a welcome sound. It was treating me fine until some HOA decided they owned my driveway. I gave him the rundown. There was a long pause on the other end. "That's not how any of this works. HOAs don't have eminent domain authority. Hell, they're not even governmental entities." That's what I figured, but I wanted to check if there's some weird Kentucky law I don't know about. Marcus laughed. "No, man. They're blowing smoke. But..." His tone shifted. "Be careful with these HOA types. Remember Jim Keller from the 5th? His daughter got fined $500 for having the wrong shade of beige curtains visible from the street. These people have nothing better to do than make up rules and enforce them like they're guarding Fort Knox." After hanging up with Marcus, I decided to do some research on Meadowbrook Estates. It wasn't hard to find them. Their website was a glossy advertisement for exclusive community living with rigorous standards of aesthetic excellence. Translation: Overpriced houses and neighbors who'd measure your grass with a ruler. What interested me more was their location. Meadowbrook sat about a quarter-mile down the county road from my property, but there was no logical reason they'd need access through my land. They already had 2 entrance points off the main road, both properly maintained and wide enough for emergency vehicles. This wasn't about safety. This was about something else. I did what any reasonable person would do. I installed security cameras at my gate and the end of my driveway, then waited to see what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long. The following Sunday, as I was finishing up some work on my deck, I heard the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel. My security app pinged, and I checked my phone to see a white SUV with Meadowbrook Estate Security emblazoned on the side, stopped at my gate. A man in a tan uniform was examining the padlock. I called Marcus immediately. "I've got trespassers claiming to be Meadowbrook Security at my gate." "On my way," he said without hesitation. "Don't confront them." But patience has never been my strong suit. I hopped in my truck and drove down to meet my visitors. As I approached, I could see 2 men, one in a security uniform and another in a polo shirt and khakis, taking photos of my gate and the surrounding area. I stopped my truck about 20 feet away and got out slowly. "Gentlemen, you're trespassing on private property," I called out. The security guard looked startled, but the man in the polo turned to me with a practiced smile. "Mr. Garrison, I presume?" "I'm Peter Mills, Facilities Manager for Meadowbrook. We're just conducting a preliminary assessment for the access route implementation." "There is no implementation," I said firmly. "This is private property, and you're trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Mills' smile didn't falter. "I understand your confusion, but the board has already passed the resolution. We're simply following protocol." "Your board has no authority over my property," I replied. "And if you don't leave now, I'll be pressing charges for trespassing." As if on cue, Marcus' patrol car pulled up behind them, lights flashing. The situation de-escalated quickly after that. Marcus explained, with official authority behind his words, that Meadowbrook had absolutely no jurisdiction over my property. Mills and his security guard left with thinly veiled threats about pursuing other channels, but I could tell they were rattled by the appearance of actual law enforcement. "What the hell are they playing at?" I asked Marcus as we watched them drive away. He shook his head. "No idea, but I've seen HOAs pull some crazy stunts before. They're used to bullying people who don't know their rights." "Well, they picked the wrong guy to bully," I said, but something about the encounter left me uneasy. They seemed too confident, too prepared. This wasn't just a power trip, they wanted my land for something specific. The next day, I decided to pay a visit to the county clerk's office. If Meadowbrook was planning something, there might be paperwork filed. Alice, the county clerk who'd been there since dinosaurs roamed Kentucky, greeted me with a smile. "Xavier Garrison. Haven't seen you since you filed those building permits. How's that beautiful house of yours?" "It's good, Alice. Listen, I'm having some trouble with Meadowbrook Estates. They're claiming they need access to my property for some kind of emergency route. Have they filed anything official with the county?" Alice frowned. "Meadowbrook? Let me check." She disappeared into the back and returned a few minutes later with a thick folder. "They've been busy lately. Submitted plans for a major expansion, luxury condos, a golf course, the works. But I don't see anything about emergency access routes. Can I take a look at those plans?" I asked. As Alice spread out the development maps on the counter, my blood ran cold. The proposed golf course extended right up to my property line, with a scenic overlook clubhouse positioned where my land offered the best views of the valley below. "When were these submitted?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "About 3 months ago. They're still pending approval from the zoning board." Everything suddenly made sense. They didn't want an emergency access route, they wanted my land for their expansion. The HOA president's visit, the official sounding letter, the trespassing assessment team, it was all a pressure campaign to get me to cave. But why not just make an offer? Unless. Alice, what's the status of the water rights for this development? Alice raised an eyebrow. Sharp as ever, Xavier. That's been the sticking point. The county won't approve the expansion without adequate water access, and they're at capacity with their current wells. And there it was. My property had natural springs and a year-round creek running through it, perfect for a water-hungry golf course. I thanked Alice and headed straight to my truck, my mind racing. This wasn't just harassment, this was a calculated attempt to steal my land by making it seem like I had no choice but to cooperate. And something told me they wouldn't stop at strongly worded letters. I wasn't wrong. 2 days later, I received another certified letter, this time from something called the County Emergency Services Advisory Board, stating that my road had been identified as critical infrastructure, and demanding that I remove my gate within 14 days or face daily fines. The letterhead looked official, but something felt off. I called the county administration office directly. "Ma'am, can you tell me if there's a County Emergency Services Advisory Board?" I asked the receptionist. What now?" She sounded genuinely confused. "We have an emergency management agency, but no advisory board that I know of." I decided it was time to get legal help. My nephew, Kyle, had recently passed the bar and specialized in property law. I emailed him copies of everything I'd received and gave him a call to explain the situation. "Uncle X, this is bizarre," Kyle said after reviewing the documents. "These letters are completely fabricated. The HOA has no authority to demand access to your property, and this advisory board doesn't even exist. So what do I do? Document everything. Keep your security cameras running. And let's draft a cease and desist letter. Then, if they continue, we can file for a restraining order and possibly pursue charges for fraud, harassment, and attempted extortion." The cease and desist letter felt good to send, but I doubted it would stop whatever Kathleen Evanston had planned. I was right to be skeptical. The next escalation came at 7 a.m. the following Monday, when I was awakened by the sound of heavy machinery. I threw on clothes and rushed outside to find a small bulldozer and a work crew at my front gate. The gate itself was open, the lock had been cut, and they were already grading the first section of my driveway. I sprinted toward them, shouting over the engine noise. "Stop! What the hell do you think you're doing?" The bulldozer operator cut the engine, looking confused. A foreman stepped forward, hard hat in hand. "Sir, we're implementing the emergency access improvements as scheduled." "Scheduled by who?" I demanded. He pulled out a work order. "Meadowbrook Community Development. We're widening and resurfacing the access route as specified in the county approval." "There is no county approval," I said through gritted teeth. "This is private property, and you're trespassing. Pack up your equipment and get out now, or I'm calling the sheriff." The foreman looked genuinely confused. "But we have all the paperwork." Mr. Mills assured us everything was cleared with the property owner. "I'm the property owner, and I can assure you nothing has been cleared. You've cut my lock, trespassed on my land, and begun unauthorized construction. That's criminal damage and trespassing, minimum." I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, putting it on speaker so the crew could hear me reporting them. They began packing up before I even finished the call. The paperwork looked legit, the foreman said apologetically as they prepared to leave. "We've worked with Meadowbrook before, never had issues." "Let me see that work order," I said. He handed it over reluctantly. The document was impressive, county letterhead, official stamps, even a signature from someone claiming to be a county commissioner. If I hadn't already checked with the county offices, I might have believed it myself. "Do you mind if I keep this?" I asked. "My attorney will want to see it." The foreman hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, take it. Looks like somebody's playing games, and I don't want my company caught in the middle. After they left, I drove down to inspect the damage. They'd only managed to grade about 20 feet of my driveway before I stopped them, but the cut lock and gate damage were obvious. I took photos of everything, then called Kyle again. "This has gone from harassment to criminal behavior," he said after I explained what happened. "We need to talk to the county prosecutor." "I want to go higher," I replied. "This isn't just one person making a mistake. This is organized, systematic fraud. Fake government documents, property damage, trespassing, all to try to steal my land." Kyle was silent for a moment. "You know, you might be right. This could fall under the state attorney general's office if it involves systematic fraud and impersonation of government officials. Let me make some calls." While Kyle worked his legal connections, I reinforced my gate with heavier chains and added more security cameras. I also printed large "No trespassing" and "private property" signs and posted them every 100 feet along my property line. If Meadowbrook wanted a war, I'd make damn sure they knew they were in one. That evening, as I was reviewing the security footage from the morning's confrontation, my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a tall, distinguished-looking black woman in a tailored suit, flanked by Marcus in his deputy uniform. "Mr. Garrison. I'm Kelly Thompson, assistant to the state attorney general. Your nephew Kyle reached out to our office about a potentially serious case of fraud and impersonation of government officials. May we come in?" For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything that had happened, showing Ms. Thompson the letters, the fake work order, and the security footage of both the assessment team and the construction crew. She took detailed notes, occasionally exchanging glances with Marcus. "This is extremely concerning," she said finally. "What you're describing is an organized attempt to defraud you of your property rights using falsified government documents. That's a serious state-level offense. So what happens now?" I asked. "I'll take this back to the AG's office tonight. In the meantime, Deputy Williams here will file a formal report about the trespassing and property damage. Don't engage with anyone from Meadowbrook or respond to any more communications. Direct everything to our office." She handed me her card. "We'll move quickly on this." After they left, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Finally, someone with actual authority was taking this seriously. The next morning, my security system alerted me to someone at the gate again. I checked the camera feed to see Kathleen Evanston herself, along with Peter Mills and another man I didn't recognize, examining my new reinforced lock and security cameras. I was about to call Marcus when my phone rang. It was Ms. Thompson. "Mr. Garrison, I'm calling with an update. The Attorney General has reviewed your case and found clear evidence of criminal fraud. We're preparing to execute search warrants on Meadowbrook's offices today. In the meantime, do not engage with any of their representatives." "That might be difficult," I said. "Kathleen Evanston and 2 others are at my gate right now." There was a pause. "Stay in your house. We'll send Deputy Williams immediately." I wanted to confront them, but I followed instructions and watched through my security cameras instead. Kathleen seemed agitated, gesturing emphatically while Mills shook his head. The third man, older, expensive suit, appeared to be arguing with both of them. 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived in his patrol car, followed by another deputy vehicle. I couldn't hear what was said, but the body language told the story. Kathleen began pointing at my property and speaking forcefully. Marcus crossed his arms and shook his head. The well-dressed man tried to intervene, but Marcus held up a hand to silence him. Finally, all 3 Meadowbrook representatives got into their cars and left, with Marcus following closely behind them. My phone rang again. "Xavier, it's Marcus. Those 3 are being escorted to the county line. The AG's office doesn't want them leaving town, but we can at least keep them off your property. Thompson says to sit tight, things are moving fast now." They certainly were. By mid-afternoon, the local news was reporting that the state attorney general's office had executed search warrants at the Meadowbrook Estates HOA offices and the homes of several board members, including President Kathleen Evanston. The story broke wide open the next day. According to the news, investigators had uncovered evidence of a sophisticated fraud scheme, targeting not just me but several property owners around the planned expansion area. The HOA had created fake government documents, falsified county approvals, and even set up shell companies to pressure landowners into giving up valuable properties. The third man at my gate turned out to be Ronald Pierce, the developer behind the expansion project. Emails found during the search revealed that he had explicitly directed Kathleen and the HOA board to secure the Garrison property by any means necessary, due to its water resources being critical to project viability. 3 days later, Ms. Thompson returned to my house, this time with a formal letter from the Attorney General himself. Mr. Garrison, I'm pleased to inform you that we filed criminal charges against 7 individuals associated with Meadowbrook Estates, including fraud, impersonation of government officials, conspiracy, and attempted extortion. Ms. Evanston, Mr. Mills, and Mr. Pierce were taken into custody this morning. She handed me the letter, which officially confirmed that the HOA had no authority whatsoever over my property and that any documents suggesting otherwise were fraudulent. The letter explicitly stated that as a private property owner, I had full rights to maintain my private road without any obligation to provide access to Meadowbrook Estates or any other entity. The Attorney General wanted me to personally apologize for what you've been through, Thompson added. Your military service and the way you've handled this situation with such restraint are commendable. I'm just glad it's over, I said, though part of me remained skeptical. What happens to Meadowbrook now? The HOA itself will likely be placed under court supervision while a full investigation continues. There are indications that this wasn't their first attempt at this kind of scheme. As for the expansion project, the county has already suspended all pending applications from the developer. After she left, I walked my property line, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The land that I'd worked my whole life to afford, the peaceful retirement I'd planned so carefully, it was all secure again. The following weeks brought more developments. 3 more Meadowbrook board members were charged, and the investigation expanded to include 2 county employees who had allegedly been bribed to look the other way. The local paper ran a feature on how HOAs sometimes overreach their authority, using my case as a primary example. Kyle called with more good news. Uncle X, the AG's office wants to know if you'd be willing to testify at the preliminary hearings. Also, they're considering using this case to push for new state legislation that would create stricter penalties for HOAs that attempt to extend their authority beyond their boundaries. Count me in, I said without hesitation. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom and watched as Kathleen Evanston, looking much less confident in prison scrubs than she had on my porch with her clipboard, pleaded guilty to multiple felony counts. Peter Mills and Ronald Pierce had already cut deals, agreeing to testify against the others in exchange for reduced sentences. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, addressed Evanston directly before announcing her sentence. Ms. Evanston, you used your position of community trust to orchestrate a scheme of intimidation and fraud against hardworking property owners. You falsified government documents, impersonated officials, and attempted to steal land through deception. The court sentences you to 5 years in state prison and orders restitution to all affected property owners. As Kathleen was led away, her eyes briefly met mine. There was no remorse there, only anger at having been caught. I felt nothing but relief that she'd no longer be able to terrorize people with her clipboard and false authority. Outside the courthouse, several reporters approached me for comment. Mr. Garrison, how does it feel to have stood up to this HOA and won? I thought for a moment. It's not about winning. It's about justice. HOAs serve a purpose when they stick to their proper role, but when they become vehicles for fraud and intimidation, they need to be held accountable. I'm grateful to the Attorney General's office for taking this seriously. Another reporter pushed forward. Would you encourage other homeowners to stand up to their HOAs? I'd encourage everyone to know their rights, I replied. Whether it's an HOA or any other entity, no one has the right to bully you off your property or trick you into giving up what's rightfully yours. Document everything, seek legal help, and don't be intimidated by official-looking paperwork or titles. Real authority comes with accountability. As the reporters dispersed, Kyle approached with a smile. "Nice job, Uncle X, very diplomatic." 20 years in the military taught me something about diplomacy, I said with a laugh. "Though I prefer the direct approach." "Well, your direct approach helped expose a major fraud operation and will likely change state law. Not bad for a retired guy just trying to enjoy his private road." We walked to our cars together, and I paused to look back at the courthouse. You know what the irony is? If they'd just come to me honestly and made a fair offer for water rights or limited access, I might have considered it. It was the lies and intimidation that guaranteed I'd fight them every step of the way. "Some people can't imagine just being straightforward," Kyle said. "They think manipulation is always the better strategy." "Their loss," I replied. "Now, how about we head back to my place? I've got steaks marinating, and I'm thinking of putting in a new security gate, something with a little more flair this time." As we drove back to my house, up the private road that would remain private, I felt a deep satisfaction. Not just because I'd protected what was mine, but because in doing so, I'd helped expose a corruption that had likely victimized many others less able to fight back. The next month, I received a letter from the state attorney general himself, thanking me for my persistence and civic courage in the face of organized fraud. Attached was a copy of proposed legislation, the Property Rights Protection Act, which specifically addressed HOA overreach and created new penalties for falsifying government documents. I framed both and hung them in my home office, right next to my military commendations. Different kinds of battles, but both fought for the same principles, standing up for what's right, protecting what matters, and never backing down from bullies, whether they carry weapons or clipboards. As for Meadowbrook Estates, they got a court-appointed administrator and strict oversight. The expansion plans were permanently shelved, the golf course never built. I heard through Marcus that the remaining board members were required to undergo ethics training and that property values actually increased once the corrupt leadership was removed. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just good for you, it's good for everyone. Except, of course, for those who think rules and laws don't apply to them. For them, it's a much-needed lesson in the limits of power and the strength of one stubborn homeowner who knows his rights and isn't afraid to defend them. My private road remains just that, private. And every time I drive up it, past the new security gate with its prominently displayed, "Private Property," sign, I smile at the thought of Kathleen Evanston and her clipboard, learning the hard way that some people can't be bullied, some rights can't be fabricated away, and some roads will always remain private, no matter how badly you want them.